Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Real Talk on this December 2nd. Very much looking forward to what we have coming up today. We're going to be talking about innovation. We're going to be talking about city building. We're going to be talking about what a post-COVID sustainable energy economy looks like here in Western Canada and across the country. The new CEO of Innovate Edmonton will be joining us in just a moment. Newly minted, just getting started. And we're grateful that Catherine Warren is making some time to talk to us today. Also, when we talk about innovation, when we talk about disruption, am I using all the key phrases? Am I on my way to securing a keynote speech somewhere? In all seriousness, though, disruption is all anybody's talking about these days because it's happening all around us. And the disruptors are seeing great success, including the CEO of the company, the local company that proudly is the presenting sponsor of this program. We will be meeting the CEO of the Bitcoin Well today. You're going, what Bitcoin Solutions? Wasn't it Bitcoin Solutions? They've rebranded. They've just rolled out a brand new, it looks great. You can check out the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com if you want to see it. But we're going to ask CEO Adam O'Brien what that's all about. Why are they rebranding? They're about to go public. It's an exciting time for them, and obviously an exciting time for us to have them on board. They've got Bitcoin ATMs in and around Edmonton, including 8 of the 10 Cafe Remedy locations. Everybody loves those. They're Bitcoin ATMs also across Canada, but they're proudly headquartered right here in Edmonton, Alberta. Just like us, they've still got their same goal of making Bitcoin more accessible and easy, just a new name. We'll talk to Adam O'Brien about Bitcoin Well coming up just after our 9:30 headlines. With regards to Real Talk today, Sam, I'd say it's a good time to maybe get it going.
Real Talk starts now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
So we'll talk some politics today. We're going to get into Alberta's new drunk driving legislation as well. We want to hit that from a couple of angles. We're going to talk to a pretty prominent criminal defender. Kyla Lee will dial in from Vancouver coming up around 9:30 Mountain Time this morning, coming up in just about an hour's time. And we're also going to talk to Sheri Arsenault from Families for Justice. Sheri, the Arsenault family, and others close to them experienced the worst type of loss imaginable when 3 young men were taken suddenly involved in a motor vehicle accident, a horrific one at that, with a drunk driver behind the wheel. Sheri speaks from a horrific and a tragic firsthand experience, but her life is committed to impacting impaired driving legislation. Sheri Arsenault will be joining us around 9:45 Mountain today. You won't want to miss that conversation. She's been working with the provincial government, both the New Democrats and the United Conservatives, to bring into place or to ensure that Alberta has what she believes will be effective and meaningful drunk driving legislation, impaired driving legislation. We'll ask Sheri if the announcement yesterday indicates that her work is actually accomplishing what she's endeavoring to accomplish. That's coming up in about an hour and 15 minutes. But the big news, making news in Alberta right now in business circles, is the recruitment and the announcement of Catherine Warren as the new Chief Executive Officer of Innovate Edmonton. She's been kind enough to make time for us this morning. Catherine Warren, welcome to Real Talk. And let me say, welcome to Edmonton.
I am so happy to be joining you this morning.
So I've got about a million questions for you, and I'm curious to pick your brain. I mean, we could run through your CV. My intro could be 10 minutes long. I will note that I want to talk to you about a Bachelor of Science degree in physics you got way back when in Oregon, focusing on climate change. You're a graduate. You have a grad degree from Columbia School of Journalism. I want to talk to you about that as well. But the big conversations we want to have right now center around what Innovate Edmonton's mandate will be and what it means to prepare a city, a municipality, a jurisdiction for the next generation economy. Why don't we pave sort of a foundation here? Why don't we lay a foundation for the conversation and help people understand about Innovate Edmonton? Because the last a lot of people would have heard was essentially the blowing up of Edmonton Economic Development Corporation, the migration of some of those employees to Edmonton Tourism. Are you literally right now, as you start building, are you a team of one?
I am flying solo with an amazing independent volunteer board and the communities of support all around me. And I met a number of them on Slack yesterday, my first day.
Okay, so you're coming in from Vancouver, correct? Most recently, you were working as CEO of Vancouver Economic Commission. What do you bring from Vancouver, so to speak, to here? What can you apply from what you learned there? And what does Edmonton present to you as a unique challenge as you get started?
Mhm. Well, what I think I bring from Vancouver and really my whole career is working with entrepreneurs and with startups and with innovators in the traditional economy. I spent many, many years working to transform the broadcasting industry to the digital arena. And here in Vancouver, we have some strengths in areas that I think will be familiar to Edmontonians. So certainly some AI strengths, but nothing like what Edmonton has. Working clean energy and green buildings and in the impact economy. And so those are some, I hope, transferable skills and sectors that I can bring across. And then, of course, I'm very psyched to learn about everything that Edmonton has to offer locally and to offer the world.
What is it that sets a city apart in your experience, what you've seen around the world, or maybe even what you've manifested yourself in Vancouver and in through some of your other professional endeavors? What is it that determines a city's readiness for success when it comes to things like developing tech or developing industries, attracting big investment? I know that that's something that you've been very proud of through your career. How does a city set the table for that?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things the city can do is be a client for innovation. So the city itself can be a leader and a role model in soliciting bids from startups and from innovators so that those new companies can get their first big pilot projects underway with a flagship client, like a city or an airport or a transit system or a crown corp. So that's one kind of infrastructure partnership that cities can offer. Secondly, cities are great crucibles for strange bedfellows. So where creativity and technology come together, for example, in arts and culture and in digital media. And then I think tackling the big problems. So cities are where it's at when it comes to climate resiliency. For example, last year I had the privilege to attend the C40 Mayor's Climate Summit. And, you can really see that it's at the municipal level where change is made and where innovation happens.
How much of your job relies on political cooperation, and how much of your job or efforts can be hampered by political interference? In other words, talking about climate resiliency indicates an awareness of where the world is going and probably the proper focus when it comes to preparing an economy and a population for the next generation. At the same time, climate resiliency, for whatever reason, and everybody watching and listening right now knows exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have to waste my time, Catherine, nor your time to really develop the theory of what I'm getting at here. It's used, it's politicized almost in a way to suggest that you're attacking the bedrock of what has been Alberta's biggest player when it comes to our bottom line. How do you pursue climate resiliency in this era of highly politicized dialogue?
Well, far be it from me to start my second day punching anyone in the gut. So that is not how I mean to go on. But what I mean by climate resiliency and clean energy and green tech, these are all things that are going to be very much a part of creating a sustainable Canada and a sustainable world. And I think Edmonton is really well positioned to pivot in this regard. And we want to live in a city and in an innovation economy where no workers are left behind, where no opportunities are left unchecked, and not kind of ghettoize innovation in kind of the glamour bubble of tech, but make sure innovation is distributed fairly and people have the ability to contribute to the innovation economy and to the sustainable economy.
The glamour bubble. I like that because you've exactly nailed down how I think some people perceive these conversations to go. I only know this, Catherine, because I've worked in talk radio for many years, and I've fielded calls from people when, we hear right now even Imperial Oil, walking away, writing off, about $1 billion in assets in the Alberta oil sands. It means 200 jobs lost. And you might look at the numbers and say, well, 200, that's nothing compared to the 6,500 in this story, or the 8,000 jobs lost in this story, or the 1,500 jobs, but it's still 200 people that now enter a job market that's been decimated, quite frankly. And I'm not here to kill anybody's spirits. The point I'm getting at is we'll talk to a pipeliner, or you talk to somebody that's worked on the rigs, or you talk to somebody that's run a hotshot service or anything like that in Alberta. And I find that these people that have been incredible entrepreneurs through the years, that bring a lot of experience to the table, that I'm sure are teachable, oftentimes, at least at a personal level, underestimate their ability to pivot. And I think that there's a certain cynicism that probably exacerbates them underestimating themselves. I mean, what's your message? How do you change people's minds in that regard, that there is opportunity for them in a new economy? Where does that work begin?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that everybody has been hit by the pandemic. This has been a really tough time. And I'm conscious that the innovation community, as well as traditional sectors, are under tremendous pressure to conduct business, to respond to urgent global needs, and to pivot. And so I also feel incredibly fortunate to have found this wonderful job at this really key time of transformation. But, kind of back to the heart of your question, this really needs to be taught at a very early level. I think in education, as early as elementary education, kids are streamed to think that they can have kind of an old school job or a job in video games, but they don't really hear the message that a lot of really cool stuff happens in the traditional economy. And there's a ton of room for innovating and cross-pollinating between, let's say, the digital and traditional economies. And so, when I say that part of the vision is that no one will be left behind in Edmonton's innovation economy, it's to really reinforce that upskilling and training and access to mentorship from other sectors needs to be available in order for everyone to participate. And the other thing that's really key is accessibility to digital technologies and connectivity. And so making sure that at every age and at every stage, people have really good broadband and the equipment that they need to participate and to re-educate.
If you're just tuning in, if you're streaming this audio live on Mixlr right now, you're hearing from Catherine Warren, just announced as the new Chief Executive Officer of Innovate Edmonton, the City of Edmonton, earmarking $5 million in funding for this. Catherine, so people will be trying to sort of stay up to speed on where this is all going. Obviously, a lot of the people downtown know exactly what your mandate will be, and they know the backstory. For those that don't, we've had Edmonton Economic Development Corporation, right? You've got Innovate Edmonton now. You've got Edmonton Global, you've got the Edmonton Metro Region Board and others, and you could forgive someone that's having a difficult time staying on top of it all or sorting through them and trying to understand what each individual mandate is. How do you ensure that there's no overlap, and how do Edmontonians ensure that they're getting bang for their buck there? This is going to be a successful venture. What do you know about the role that Innovate Edmonton will play in that entire landscape?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I see our role as a convener and as a catalyst. And, as you've described it, and as Edmontonians know, maybe what we have is more of a mosaic or a patchwork, when what we really need is a quilt. Like, we need all this stuff drawn together. And I'm a maker, so I love these hands-on analogies. And I think it's going to take, me working with our board and the community in the first 90 days to come up with a critical path to really understand which organizations could be working more closely together, how they're already working together, where there might be economies of scale, for example, in administration, finance, and HR, so that the taxpayers can get more bang for their buck as well.
What was it that, let me ask you just personally, I don't know if are you in your home right now? It looks incredible, by the way. This is in Vancouver, right?
Thank you so much. It's actually in North Vancouver.
North Vancouver, even better. Just an absolutely remarkable and beautiful and wonderful pocket of the country. So is Edmonton. But you've been doing big things out in Vancouver, and quite frankly, you're a hot commodity. So what was it that drew you to this? I'm sure that you could have stayed there. I'm sure you could have gone somewhere else. What was it when Nassim Bashir and the board reached out to you and made you this offer? What was it that made you say, yeah, I'm going to pick up my life and I'm going to move to Alberta?
Well, first of all, it was a long process to even get the offer, and a competitive process. And I had been undertaking an international job search at an incredibly delicate time, as you can imagine, with the pandemic. And so I really was approaching things like I wanted a job with a higher purpose. I wanted a role where I could really make a difference using my skills of finance, fundraising, mentorship and growth for companies of different sizes, and international development, kind of tying things at the local and global level. And so when I saw this job and I read the terms of reference, I just got incredibly excited. And I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I've lived in a variety of cities, including Portland and Austin. And I've always thought of Edmonton as kind of analogous to those cities. So I'm expecting to be surprised, but I'm also expecting to really feel that community sense.
I've got a big Make Edmonton Weird sticker up, right, where I throw darts at my house. So we've got at least one thing in common from a potential branding angle with Austin, that's for sure. We're talking to Catherine Warren, who's just joining us, the new CEO of Innovate Edmonton. By the way, I'm watching our live YouTube chat right now. The people that are watching live right now, streaming on YouTube, and the former CEO, by the way, of EEDC is chiming in. Brad Ferguson welcomes you to Edmonton. Says he looks forward to your leadership. There's a great question here from Eric. Eric's watching, and he wonders, Catherine, how do you appease the folks, quote, in between tech and traditional industry while facilitating their disruption? Eric says, as an example, the cattle lobby gets in the way of things like future food sources, like cellular agriculture. What a great question from Eric watching this morning.
That is a great question. And I saw cellular chicken in the headlines in The Guardian last night. So we're all about cellular food today, I guess. Well, first of all, I'm not an appeaser, so that's not really in my nature, but maybe a bit of a broker. So, taking the best of both worlds and kind of bringing that together. I also come from a province that's a resource economy, and we've had our own, turf wars and battlegrounds between the digital and traditional economies. So, I think I have a bit of a backbone in that regard, but I also have a listening approach. And I think it's really key to get companies at different areas of the province and different areas of growth working together. and then finding what we can find something unique about Edmonton that will distinguish and position the city on a world stage. And there's so much there, in addition to cellular agriculture and ag tech, there's of course health tech and everything that's going on with pandemic recovery. There's the clean and renewables sector, and of course AI, where Edmonton just has tremendous bench strength. And then a shout out to the impact economy in Edmonton too, which is growing in areas where people want to deliver back on metrics like people, planet, and profit.
I want to circle back on that. You've referenced the impact economy a couple of times, plus some great questions coming in from our viewers and those that are tuned in as well, taking Mixlr with them on the go on their morning commute or whatever the case may be. Catherine Warren, hang tight for 1 second. Wanted to let you know when we're talking, I mean, what a great opportunity we have right now to check in with Catherine on Edmonton-grown business, on Alberta-grown business that's seen big success. And we're going to talk to another one of them in about 10 minutes when Adam O'Brien joins us from the Bitcoin well. But I want to recognize Local Waste. This is a company that's locally grown, locally owned, locally operated, employing local people. And they've been doing that for a quarter century already, 25 years of experience going up against the big, faceless, multinational garbage guys. Local Waste is making it happen here, and they want your business at localwaste.ca or by calling them on a first-name basis, Chris and Lauren, at 780-242-9746. Our thanks to Local Waste for their generous sponsorship of Real Talk. Catherine Warren, our guest, the newly minted CEO at Innovate Edmonton. Catherine, I want to go back to our YouTube stream. Mark watches from Utah every single morning. Really love this. And he says, the best way for innovation and startups to flourish is to have a partnership between startups, post-secondaries, municipalities, the provincial government, and capital financing, VCs, and banks. Do you concur? And if so, how do you make that happen? How have you made it happen in past, and what do you intend to do here?
I so concur with that. And, I'm looking forward to championing that in Edmonton with other people who share that vision. You mentioned my role as CEO of the Vancouver Economic Commission, but prior to that, I was the CEO of Canada's innovation district called the Centre for Digital Media, which is kind of a hotbed for academia and industry in creative technologies. So game studios, art galleries, graduate programs, transit hub, greenways, bikeways, walkways, and really like a neighborhood where innovation is meant to happen. And, certainly, just walking through the campus or through the district, that's where ideas happen and that's where relationships are built. And so I completely agree. It's about bringing these groups together. It's about uniting people around common cause and common purpose, and then tackling some of the world's biggest problems and thereby gaining access to international markets.
You've referenced, Catherine, and it's no secret, Edmonton's prominence, I think, on the global stage when it comes to AI and some of the amazing work that's being done here, not as a leader in Canada, but literally as a leader around the world. I mean, I've heard talk to people that know more than me, Cam Linke and that crew here in Edmonton that have said, with humility appropriately, in true Canadian fashion, that Edmonton is probably a top 3 or a top 5 center when it comes to what they're doing, what people are doing here, and the talent that they're attracting in AI. Let me ask somewhat of a biting question as we all look in the mirror. Why has Edmonton or why have we done such a lousy job of sending that message to the world? Why does the world not think of Edmonton, Canada, when it thinks of AI? Because the numbers are there.
I'm not actually sure that that's true, just playing devil's advocate.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
Last year, right around this time, I was traveling with some colleagues from Consider Canada Cities Alliance. Malcolm Bruce, who heads up Edmonton Global, is our board chair. And, we were traveling together in Japan, and it was very clear that Edmonton's on the radar.
Catherine joining us, Catherine Warren, as you know, if you're just tuning in, the new CEO of Impact Edmonton, this impact economy. Catherine, if you need a second, I know that we're live and there's like very few breaks. If you want to take a sip of your tea or water, that's totally fine. But I wanted to ask you this impact economy for people that are wanting to learn more, people that are wanting to position themselves. One of the most exciting messages. I mean, we receive messages. I'm getting them right now from people, young people, like people that are either in university or college or post-secondary or just starting their first business. People that I mean, they're not. I would like to think of young people in their careers in their 40s, but that's just because I like to talk myself off the ledge every once in a while. But for the next generation, for the 20-year-olds and the 22-year-olds that are going to see this, what's your advice to them, people that want to make an impact in this economy as you describe it? Sam, did we lose our audio? I think we might. We may have lost Catherine. We may have lost your audio, unfortunately, which we're going to try to troubleshoot this. Oh, we got you back.
Yeah, I would say try and find a great mentor. I would say learn to reach out to your professors and join groups of people that share your common values. Sorry.
No, I can tell your throat's giving you fits right now. Let me give you a second. I've been in this situation and it's a total nightmare because your throat's going to start to close up, and here you are trying to get this message out to the next generation. Why don't we just do this? It's 8:58. I'm going to get to the headlines anyway. Let's talk again soon. Once you're here, once you've hit the ground running, once you start making a few key hires, once you start making some tangible progress, and we can talk about where you're going to take this with Innovate Edmonton, I'd love to talk with you again, Catherine, and I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you so much.
You got it. That's Catherine Warren, Chief Executive Officer of Innovate Edmonton. I have been there. You're doing a live interview and your throat just starts to go on you, and it is the worst thing in the world. I'm going to knock on wood, Sam, because we don't have commercial breaks to throw to that I'm not reading live. We don't have a newscast to throw to that an anchor will take over. And so if I find myself, knock on wood, in a position like that, she handled that admirably. I've been in that position before. I'm impressed with Catherine Warren. I mean, obviously, you're going to go, well, duh. Like, she just got a pretty high-profile job after an extensive search and yada, yada, yada. And I'm not here to just pump her tires, but she has an important job with an important mandate. And it sounds to me like she knows what the hell she's talking about. I was really impressed with her. You can let me know what you think by checking out the hashtag RealTalkRJ. That's how you can talk to us here on the show. That's what we're monitoring, along with our YouTube comments, and we love everybody that's tuned in watching live on YouTube. Plus, we know our Mixler audio. Our Mixler community is massive. This is our audio streaming community. I hate to give you this. I hate to give you this information, but the fact of the matter is, the Mixler audience is. Can you say dwarfing anymore? I think you can say dwarfing. Someone correct me if I can't say that anymore, and I'll eliminate it. But the Mixler audience is dwarfing our YouTube audience right now, which, you know what that says to me, Sam, is that people are taking the show on the go, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, we're doing a radio show, and we're doing a radio show with a really cool video component, and I'm working hard to get the visuals up here. But I mean, you're right. This show is meant to be listened to on the road. This show is meant to be listened to walking your dog. It's meant to be listened to while you're making your morning breakfast.
And you know what I'm loving is that you'll see the audience of who's, and this is all this is show number 7. Right? Or no, show number 8. We're on show number 8. Pretty cool, by the way, to see. Let me pump our tires for a second, because we're not part of a corporate machine, so we got to pump our own tires. I'm pretty excited to see Podboard. The Podboard 100. They have their big list in the United States, the 100 top podcasts, and they have a Canadian list as well. Podboard 100 tweeting this morning, it's starting to feel like Groundhog Day. 6 days consecutively, the most listened to podcast, the most listened to daily podcast in the country is Real Talk. And that's because of listeners and viewers like you. The point I wanted to make is that we've got our live streaming audience on YouTube, And then you see what happens to that YouTube link through the day, and it amplifies by about 10 times. Plus Mixler, plus the podcast. This community is formidable already, which is pretty exciting for us. It's probably why I think advertisers are probably interested in supporting the show as well, and we're really grateful that they're here with us. One of them is Friesen Brothers, who across their 14 and soon to be 15 Alberta locations, when they open that beautiful South Edmonton store, just off Rabbit Hill Road, it's not a grocery store. I mean, they have groceries there, but it's going to, trust me, when you walk in there, it'll be like the first time I walked into Friesen Brothers. It was like 2.5 years ago in Stony Plain, and I just went, what is this? It's far from your average grocery store. Unbelievable. In part because they employ Red Seal chefs. And so if you right now, you're thinking it's going to be a dialed down Christmas, 2 of you around the table, or maybe 6 or 7 or 8, depending on the size of your family, and you'd rather have somebody else handle the turkey and the fresh grown Alberta produce, you'd rather have somebody else quarterbacking that for you, check out Friesen Brothers in your community across the province of Alberta. Proudly Alberta grown, Alberta owned. At Friesen Brothers, they've got you covered. Sam, before we bring in a grand and great disruptor, this guy is really, really impressive, and you're going to see why. The CEO of Bitcoin Well, Adam O'Brien. Let's get to what's making news right now. Here's a look at the headlines, everybody. Want to take a look at Alberta's COVID numbers right now. Unfortunately, Sam, why don't we put those numbers up so people can take a look? This is striking. Alberta, this is not averaged out per capita. This has nothing to do with cases per population. These are just the numbers. Alberta leading Canada in active cases of COVID-19 with more than 16,500. Ontario with more than 3 times our population, a couple thousand behind, and Quebec just behind there. So that's a perspective check of where Alberta stacks up right now. Some tough news when it comes to Alberta's oil sands. Imperial Oil joining Kinder Morgan, Total, and others leaving the oil sands, announcing that it intends to write off about $1.2 billion in assets, oil sands assets. It probably will lead to about 200 job losses. Imperial Oil says the assets are non-producing, underdeveloped, doesn't expect any future cash expenditures related to the impairment charge. Imperial, by way of statement yesterday, saying this won't include the high-value liquid-rich portion of the company's unconventional asset portfolio, says it still plans to develop that. Canadian Hollywood star, the star of Juno, Elliot Page, made his debut yesterday. The Halifax native coming out with a statement, quote, "I am trans. My name is Elliot. I feel lucky to be writing this." Elliot went on to write, "I'm also scared of the invasiveness, the hate, the jokes, and of violence." Without question, Elliot Page immediately becomes a leader and a high-profile face of the transgender community globally. And as Jimmy Kimmel put it last night, Pardon Palooza is underway. Last week, President Donald Trump pardoned his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, who lied repeatedly to the FBI. Everybody watching right now to see if, and no, this is not a joke, it's 2020, will Donald Trump pardon Joe Exotic? What's your bet? Tweet at me at Real Talk RJ. Let me know if you think POTUS will pardon Joe Exotic. I saw somebody say yesterday, if that actually happens, I will remove all doubt that this entire calendar year has just been a computer simulation.
Stranger things have happened.
Yeah, the President of the United States pardoning Joe Exotic. Now, it hasn't happened yet. Let's be very clear here. It has not happened yet, but everybody's watching to see what happens. All right, let's get to our next guest. He's the founder and CEO of the Bitcoin Well, the presenting sponsor of this show, an expert in cryptocurrency and a purveyor of disruption, Adam O'Brien. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to the show here, my man, making your Real Talk debut. How are you holding up?
My man, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, hey, we've got a lot to talk about, and I've got some specific questions about Bitcoin, and I guarantee you that our listening audience does as well, because they're already everybody wants to learn about cryptocurrency, and once the big investment houses in the United States and once high-profile investors start to go public with their interest in Bitcoin, I think that maybe more and more people start to get into it themselves. Just I guess about a week ago, Bitcoin had hit an all-time high, and I guess part of it, like any other commodity like gold or anything else, the price fluctuates. But Adam, bring us up to speed on through your eyes, what's going on with Bitcoin and crypto right now.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of a combination between the Bitcoin mining cycle, which is a big, complex mathematical equation that we could probably spend an entire show talking about. And the other part of it is just seeing what's happening with our money supply right now. I mean, it's no secret the government and the federal treasury is printing money at an unprecedented level. And I think that when we see these large institutions and these large corporations kind of fleeing into Bitcoin, or you can see it fleeing away from the dollar, that catches the attention of other people, and it kind of creates this market that we're seeing right now, which is people flocking to Bitcoin really at unprecedented levels.
Yeah, Adam, what can you take us into what I mean, you've been in the business of Bitcoin for what now, 4 years or something like that? 4 or 5 years?
Almost 8, actually.
8 years.
2000, yeah, March 2013 is when I kind of jumped into the ring with Bitcoin. So yeah, it's been. I know. I was thinking about that the other day. It's been a long time.
That was far from mainstream. 8 years ago. Sam, you want to? Sam's raising his hand like he's in class right now. Sam.
No, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure if I'm doing the math correctly, Adam was in Bitcoin before you were in AM radio.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there you go. Did people think you were nuts at the time?
Oh yeah, you know the saying, the first guy through the wall gets the bloodiest is truly a statement of my life. I think that I've been through the ringer. I've been called heinous names and accused of all sorts of things. People thinking we're part of some giant Ponzi scheme or ML. It's been hilarious, but it's nice now. In recent months, and really in the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's been a lot better. People truly kind of understanding what Bitcoin is and the role that we play in Bitcoin. Because of course, we're not like, the biggest misconception is that there is a CEO of Bitcoin, right? Back in the day, that was a big thing. Well, who's the CEO of Bitcoin? It's like the same person that the CEO of gold. The CEO of gold doesn't exist, or the CEO of the internet. Bitcoin is an asset, and no one kind of controls that asset, and it's truly decentralized. And so we play a role in the Bitcoin economy, but we aren't the only kind of Bitcoin player, I guess.
I have a ton of questions that I want to ask you, and so do our viewers and so do our listeners this morning, Adam. But it wouldn't make sense for me to speak with a really impressive person. I mean, like we just did, and I'm not sure if you heard all of what Catherine Warren had to say, the new CEO of Innovate Edmonton, but she sure, I think, has her finger on the pulse of where things are going. I mean, it's obviously early, but through her career, she's proven to have an understanding of what jurisdictions need to do to make economic impacts. Was there anything that she said that jumped out at you in your position as someone that, I mean, I know you personally, if you're not comfortable, if you're not making traditional industries uncomfortable, what did you take from what she said?
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't catch the entire segment. Unfortunately, I caught kind of the last 10, 15 minutes. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. The quote unquote status quo, doing things the way we've always done them, doesn't work anymore. I mean, look at around the world. There's no better time to really showcase that we have to be innovative, right? My team, we've obviously been affected and by the pandemic, and we have to readjust how we work. And so part of the things that our team suffered was culture. We were no longer getting that in-person face-to-face time. And so we arranged an escape room virtually. And it was a company, it was out of Calgary, no hate there, please, an Edmonton company using a Calgary company, but they shifted and they now have a totally separate and different product offering because they were able to innovate and challenge what the existing kind of way of doing things is. And that's what we're all about. We're all about making people think, why do they do what they do with their money? Why does our money work like how it works? And Bitcoin is a really a purveyor and a champion of financial sovereignty. And we encourage society as a whole to be financially sovereign, which is something that our existing money doesn't really do.
Is there a question that you ask someone, if someone's speaking with you and they're thinking of someone says, I've got $100,000, or somebody says I have $10,000 or I have $1,000. I think one of the things people need to keep in mind is if Bitcoin's at $16,000, Adam, you've reminded me of this several times. That doesn't mean you need 16,000 to get in. You can get in with $20. Right. Is there, when someone comes to you and says, I'm thinking of investing in Bitcoin, whether it's a diversification play or whatever it is there one question that you ask those that are hesitant? When you talk about financial sovereignty, when you talk about our traditional understanding of wealth building or saving or security, is there one question you ask people that you find sort of hits everybody between the eyes and really resonates when they evaluate how they view finance?
Yeah, I think that less of a question and more of a statement. I do really enjoy getting people thinking and asking them or just talking about certain points. When people say, well, what is Bitcoin backed by? Asking them, well, what is the dollar backed by? And up until recently, it was unfathomable to think that money would be printed at the rate that it is, currently today. And so I think those things are kind of lining up. But one thing and one thing that I typically kind of just challenge people to do is what I call the 1% rule. And I believe that 1% of your net worth should be in Bitcoin if nothing else, then as an insurance or as a security play against everything else. And the mindset behind that is that 1% is not going to make or break you at any point in time. Hopefully, if you had $100 and lost $1, you'd be fine. And same thing if you had, that scale is quite true. And so what I think is that 1% at certain time could flip and it could be worth 99%. And that's kind of what we've seen in the past. Had you bought $100 worth of Bitcoin 10 years ago, you'd have millions and millions and millions of dollars today. And I believe that is, a reaction to what the Bitcoin market is and what the Bitcoin market has been, which is, truly a hedge against kind of the dollar or a bit of a security, in an uncertain time.
This is not what you're saying. It's just how it hit me. And you have to have Adam on camera for this because I want to see it. But this is, I'm so proud of you just just what you've done and what you've built. I think, don't you have 40 employees now or something like that? And you're about to go public and we'll talk about that in a second. But you say to us, you sit here and you say, if you would have bought Bitcoin 10 years ago, you'd have millions and millions and millions of dollars. And then you just kind of sit there with a demure smile on your face. And I just go, why didn't I listen to you? Why didn't I listen to you? I listened to other people telling me to buy other things and I got taken to the cleaners, Adam. But it's because obviously you saw opportunity there. There was cynicism all around you, but you believed that it was the right play. What was it that gave you then, 8 or 10 years ago, that still gives you now the confidence that this is the play? Because even if we talk about cryptocurrency, and I'm not pretending like I know more than what you've explained to me in past, but Bitcoin is one of hundreds or thousands of different ones. It's the leading one, right? But there's many out there. What gives you the confidence this is the play?
I think the true value that I find in Bitcoin is the decentralized nature and the fact that I own and I control it, right? The Bitcoin network is a term that I use is permissionless. And right now, to participate in Canadian finance, you need permission to do so, right? To get a bank account, you have to have an address, which already makes it exclusive and not inclusive. in order to, you have to, and of course you want to play by, or you have to play by the rules. And that makes a ton of sense because the rules are there for a good reason. However, there's a certain level of the rules that we need to kind of just be aware of, and seeing what has happened in the past. We know that fiat currency, in general, fiat currency being the Canadian dollar, the US dollar, any type of kind of treasury issued money has a lifespan, and typically that lifespan is about 150 years. The US dollar is sitting on roughly 160 years, and so the big bailout in 08 that we kind of saw, we're seeing now the unlimited printing supply happening. I think that what makes me most excited is that Bitcoin, kind of quote unquote against all odds, is truly paving the way, and is ultimately making headlines because it's performing so well against everything else. And so feeling a little bit validated in that, of course. And I put my head down and kind of just grinded it out for a lot of years. And it's nice to see that the world is now seeing the value of ownership and the value of kind of self-custody and being self-sovereign.
Adam O'Brien, our guest, he's the CEO of Bitcoin Well, based out of Edmonton. I want to ask you about going public in just a second, but first I want to tee it up and asking you, you say that sort of, there's this British band I love called the Acoustics, and they have this song, "The World is Turning On." Why do you think the world is turning on to Bitcoin? Do you think that it's had some staying power in the sense of several years, and people have been able to perceive some stability with it, some validity to it? How much do you think that COVID, that the pandemic, how much of an impact has COVID had on public interest in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think two things, from the COVID angle. One, it's just exposed a lot of holes in our existing economy and our existing money. But two, people are also open to doing things differently, right? The concept of a Zoom meeting over a podcast was quite foreign for most people.
Oh, yeah.
The concept of even, look at you, Ryan, starting a new business in a pandemic is crazy. and yet, it's working, and people are seeing other people take risks and do things differently and then get rewarded. I mean, again, the podcast and this show as an incredible example. And I think that people are kind of, I'm very bullish on our world right now. I'm very bullish on our society to be able to look at things for more than face value, and to be able to see things that, kind of slipped through the cracks before. We were all in a very comfortable state, and COVID has made us get uncomfortable. And I'm a big fan of discomfort. I think that discomfort oftentimes yields a better result and yields kind of, strength. And so I'm very, very bullish on our world and on our society doing that.
Okay, I want to get to a couple of listener questions, viewer questions coming up in just a moment. If you have a question for Adam O'Brien, our guest, he's CEO of Bitcoin Well. I'm not going to keep saying the former name, but just because they've rebranded, but formerly known as Bitcoin Solutions. They're the presenting sponsor of the show. Adam, I've known him for a long time, and he's going to be a regular contributor to this show. We're going to be talking about new economy, digital space, a whole bunch of different things. The guy's got a wealth of experience. You want to recognize a couple other sponsors right now that we're very grateful for. The team at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge has been there as we've been building this show, and we're grateful to have them on board. They are Alberta's top Jeep dealers. This new Jeep lineup that's coming out, remarkable, including the Grand Cherokee that I'm driving right now. I love it. It's got this setting. I just switched down to snow, and it's that simple. I mean, you still got to keep your eyes on the road, everybody, but driving, it's an absolute treat. And Scott and his teams at Sherwood Dodge and St. Albert Dodge are there to set you up, whether it's sales or service you're looking for. They want your business as Alberta's top Jeep dealers. Adam O'Brien, our guest, the CEO of Bitcoin Well. Adam, you are positioning yourself, and I'm pretty sure it's been a long road, a long journey to get here. But what's your time frame of when you go public? People have an opportunity to keep a keen eye. This is an Edmonton success story, that one you've built right here in Alberta. How does this all unfold?
Yeah, so basically, our venture to being listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange venture is the ability to give investors exposure to Bitcoin without the potential downside. Because while Bitcoin is a hedge, and I honestly and truly believe in the 1% rule and everything I've just said, Bitcoin is very volatile, and volatility is not for everyone, of course. And so what we've done is we've built a business that is basically profitable on transactions. And so as long as people are trading Bitcoin, essentially as long as Bitcoin remains volatile, we will have people buying and selling Bitcoin, and our stock or our market should be conducive to that. So once we do get listed, and as far as timelines go, my time and real time are often very different. I think as with every great CEO, everyone wants everything done faster than they expect. But I don't think I can comment strictly on time, simply because I don't know, and there's lots of kind of balls in the air to that respect. But I do truly think it will be hopefully within the next few months that will be listed, and that will be able. I mean, we're going to be the first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM company in the world. And it's kind of offering that validity and that giving an industry that we've kind of been a part of. We're 7 years old in this 7-year-old industry. I've been in Bitcoin 8 years. The company has been into Bitcoin ATMs for 7 years. This is so exciting for us to be able to give the world exposure to the most influential asset of our generation, by way of a profitable entity that you can trust, is very, very exciting for us.
Chris is watching or listening in right now, and he tweets at me, and he says, I'm watching on YouTube right now. He says, and Adam has me scratching my head. What am I doing? He says, 1% is FA to invest. So it sounds to me like Chris might be looking to get into Bitcoin a little bit. And I have a question from Julie I want to put in front of you in just a second here, Adam. But what does it mean to you? I mean, when you get there, and I would imagine, I mean, I don't know, maybe in a pandemic era, this will be different, which is unfortunate. But I picture you ringing the bell on the stock exchange. I think that would be such a moment. But as you stood, as you stepped up to the bell to ring the bell, what would that mean to you to be participating in a so-called traditional space as well, to be publicly traded? Because I mean, I know for a fact, and I don't know how much you want to get into this. I would love to get into it right here on Real Talk. The big banks have not been friendly to you. In fact, the big banks have made your life very difficult, haven't they?
Yeah, I think my investor relations team would probably sewer me if we went too deep into this. But yeah, ultimately, traditional finance, and a term that we use here is legacy finance, maybe a little bit cheeky to say that, but it hasn't always been easy. However, I do think that that's been to our benefit, and what I mean by that is, if I was able to walk into a regular bank and get a regular bank account, if I was able to get a standard, raise some debt, and then grow, I don't think the company would be as strong as it is today. I was faced with a level of adversity that we managed, and only managed, but that we kind of excelled through. And now that we're through it, now that we have the validity of poised to become a public company, we have the validity of a market that is the hottest market on planet Earth right now. We kind of are able to stop. Not that we ever licked our wounds, but we have our lashings, and we're stronger because of it, right? When you're working out, Ryan, you know this, right? You're on the bench press and you're cranking out the chest exercises. Your muscles tear, and then they build back stronger. And we went through a period of tearing our muscles. We weren't allowed to participate in traditional or legacy financial instruments. And now that we have all this wealth of knowledge, and we have these giant muscles behind us that we're able to use, and ultimately we're a stronger company because of that.
Let me ask you this. I want to get to some viewer and listener questions here on the hashtag RealTalkRJ, which is powered by Park Power. Julie wonders, could you ask Adam to describe the difference between, and I don't even know what she's talking about, Adam, so this is good. I'll take the answer too. She says ETH, LTC, or BCH and BTC for us newbies that don't know the language. She says, I know I could Google it, but I'd love to hear him lay it out.
No, yeah, and that's a great question, and honestly, Googling it will get you so far, and in the same way that Googling anything will get you so far, I guess I won't dive into details. So ETH or Ethereum, LTC or Litecoin, BCH or Bitcoin Cash, or BTC, which of course is Bitcoin. Ryan, you noted there are a plethora of other cryptocurrencies out there. Where Bitcoin differs from everything else is that it's truly decentralized. And what decentralized means is that there's no person or no organization or group of people that kind of control the code. So there are many blockchain products or blockchain companies or blockchain projects that claim to be decentralized. And they have decentralized capabilities and they have decentralized protocols. However, at the end of the day, there is someone behind the scenes that controls the kill switch. And so in the same way that you have an email address, realtalk@ryanjesperson.com, or I think you said your direct email the other day on air.
Yeah, people can email me directly, ryan@ryanjesperson.com. You got it.
Bingo. So ryan@ryanjesperson.com, you own and you control that. That should, for all intents and purposes, be quote unquote decentralized, that you own and control. However, you likely use an email client like Google or like Microsoft Exchange or something else, and they have the kill switch. So if you stop paying your bill, your email no longer works. And that is a centralized kind of closed loop system. Bitcoin is not like that. There is no one single party that you need to have permission to participate in the Bitcoin network. Whereas I would say all, and if not all, then there are very, very few. I'm talking like maybe one or two other cryptocurrencies that are truly decentralized. Even a Litecoin, which I'll dive into the weeds just a little bit here. Litecoin is basically a coin that has the exact same principles as Bitcoin, just on a 4 scale level. So where there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, there will be 84 million Litecoin. Where the Bitcoin blocks last 10 minutes, Litecoins last 2.5 minutes. So just think of Litecoin as basically, 1/4 of what Bitcoin is. But there's a very public founder of Litecoin. And a few years ago, that very public founder of Litecoin sold all of his Litecoin that he had. He had minted a ton. He owned a ton. He was the founder of this cryptocurrency. And what happened was, after he sold it, the entire market dumped in the same way the Pfizer market dumped when the CEO of Pfizer ditched all his stock the day after the announcement.
Yeah.
And so while the protocols of Litecoin weren't necessarily centralized, the price of Litecoin, the Litecoin market it was centralized, and it was dependent on the founder of Litecoin holding his Litecoin, which is a very dangerous thing to be in. There is no CEO of Bitcoin. The founder of Bitcoin is intentionally anonymous, and in my opinion will be until the end of time. Bitcoin is not dependent on any person or any one being. And that is by and large the thing that sets it apart from absolutely everything else on this planet.
Adam, I'm hoping, and I'm going to be honest, I'm guilty of only, this is it's not irresponsible. If I was presenting it as news without reading the story and only reading the headline, that would be irresponsible. I've only read the headline, so maybe you can take us into the story. PayPal is now to a certain degree in the Bitcoin game, and my understanding of it is that people can use their PayPal to purchase Bitcoin. That would strike me immediately as a competitor to you. Take us into the story and what this all means with PayPal getting involved.
Yeah, so the PayPal and also Wealthsimple has a very similar product. They advertise as selling Bitcoin. What they do is they sell exposure to Bitcoin. So they essentially sell a Bitcoin derivative where you don't ever take custody or control of that Bitcoin. And so the main problem with that is that we are very used to having other places like our stockbrokers or our banks take custody of our funds or of our assets. However, what PayPal is proposing is that you buy Bitcoin, you leave it in PayPal's custody, and then when you want to sell it, you hope that PayPal allows you to sell it and then gives you the money for it at market value. So buying a Bitcoin through a PayPal or through another derivative platform, you're just trusting them when there's a much easier and safer and faster alternative to just buying Bitcoin and then self-custodying it. And that truly is the safest way to do it. On my wall, kind of behind the computer, but I have a picture, I guess, of the 1933 declaration that the United States government made it illegal to own gold. And the reason they were able to do that was because over 90% of gold in the United States was held in the custody of the banks. So they just rolled up to the banks, took all the gold, and off they went. If we don't get used and don't get into the habit of self-custodying our funds, we run that risk again. And whether or not the government will ever try and confiscate your Bitcoin. I'm not sitting here with a tinfoil hat on saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying we all wear a seatbelt when we drive our cars, not because we think we're going to crash, but because we know that's the best thing to do. And I would say that holding control and self-custody of your Bitcoin is like wearing your seatbelt. You're not doing it because you're scared and you're a conspiracy theorist and you think that everything is going to, I can probably say hell in a handbasket now on Real Talk. But we are saying that this is just the responsible thing to do.
Adam, it's 9:30 on the nose, which means, in a traditional radio setting, I'd already be late for my commercial break and I'd have to get to the news and I have a guest coming up. But here, if another great question
you'd
comes,
be buying the newsroom lunch. That's what you used to say.
I used to buy the newsroom lunch. I'll buy Sam Brooks lunch anyway because I'll buy Sam Brooks. I was going to say every day, but he'll probably treat that as some sort of a verbal contract, and then I'll be on the hook for these expensive lunches. But I want to put this in front of you, Adam, because I know that you welcome difficult questions. I know the last thing you want is criticism around on the Real Talk RJ hashtag that you have not had a chance to address. So let me wrap up our conversation into a couple minutes of overtime here with a point from Patrick Wu, who says people might be getting excited about Bitcoin from this conversation on Real Talk, but keep in mind that this talk wouldn't even be on air at all if this highly volatile asset crashed instead of peaked at the wrong time. And then he says something which is true across the board. He says, like with all stocks, research what you're investing in. I think we can all agree on that. But what do you make of Patrick saying it's a highly volatile asset? We wouldn't even be talking about this if it had crashed instead of peaked at the wrong time.
Yeah, well, totally. I think we would be talking about it because we are the presenting sponsor of Real Talk and very proud to be. But he's right. The mainstream media picks up on Bitcoin when it peaks and then when it crashes. And I would just challenge Patrick and everyone with that mindset to zoom out. Zoom out is a term that I use quite frequently and that I hear the Bitcoin community using. Bitcoin crashing is such an interesting concept because Bitcoin 5 years ago was worth a fraction of what it is today. So when something is worth $100 6-7 years ago and crashes to $3,000, that is a great crash and a crash that I will welcome time in and time out. I would be very, very, very surprised and probably broke if Bitcoin crashed to $100 again. But I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's happening. I think we'd be hard pressed to see Bitcoin under $10,000 again. And frankly, if Bitcoin crashes to $10,000, guess what? It was worth $3,000 in March, and it was worth $300 in 2016. And so you look at everything in a zoomed out way, and you see gold rising a ton, and gold is largely, by and large, seen as a safe haven. And it sees a very, very comfortable kind of, 6 to 12% increase in value, basically keeping pace with inflation. And that's great. And Bitcoin is a lot more volatile than that. But when you zoom out and you see just the nice kind of steady growth of Bitcoin on basically a 45-degree angle over the last decade, you realize that, if you zoom out and you don't take a look at the peaks and valleys, you have an asset that year over year and, decade over decade, it is rising in value consistently.
Adam O'Brien, CEO of Bitcoin Well, proudly headquartered right here in Edmonton with Bitcoin ATMs across the country, soon to go public. Next time you're here on the show, I'll look forward to talking to you about that as well. Plus, Adam, we'll get into more disruption. And I know that there's a million things you love to talk about. So it's always great to connect. Thanks for making time for us this morning. And thanks for your support of Real Talk, Adam. We really appreciate it.
I'm proud to do so, man. Super, super excited, and we'll chat soon.
You got it. That's Adam O'Brien. Sam, let's recognize a sponsor here. We'll get to some quick headlines, and then I know Kyla Lee is standing by, criminal defense lawyer. As a matter of fact, Kyla named, I think it was one of the 100 most influential lawyers in Canada. She's going to talk to us about Alberta's drunk driving legislation in just a second. I mentioned that the team at Park Power, and by the way, welcome aboard, Park Power. They're powering our Real Talk RJ hashtag. This is another local company a local utilities provider. They're in the business of internet, electricity, and natural gas right here in the province of Alberta. They're offering a different option than these large traditional, what they call the incumbent utility companies. You have a problem? You dial into the call center. It's somebody here in Alberta you're going to talk to. All of their billing, customer service operations, well, they're based here in Alberta, and in addition to their low rates, their awesome service, they also give back. They share their profits with local communities. Check them out on social. They're great on social, or at parkpower.ca. We link to everything under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. Sam, let's take a quick look at the news before we get in with Kyla Lee. We'll talk about drunk driving, impaired driving legislation here in Alberta in just a moment. But first, the headlines. I'll tell you, it's hard to explain how liberating it is to go into a newscast, so to speak, at 9:35. I mean, this would be driving people crazy in another format, but wouldn't you rather have a great question, an additional question for a guest before we get to the news? I sure would. Canadian Hollywood star, the star of Juno and many other films, a native of Halifax, Elliot Page, made a debut of sorts yesterday with a statement, "I am trans. My name is Elliot. I feel lucky to be writing this." Elliot went on to say, "I'm also scared of the invasiveness, the hate, the jokes, and of violence." Elliot Page immediately becoming a leader in the transgender community. Fascinating story to follow. Alberta's COVID numbers are topping the charts. This is not something for us to be proud of. Certainly, if you take a look across Canada, Alberta leading Canada right now with more than 16,000 COVID cases. Ontario with a population 3 times the size. Look at that, 14,500 in Quebec, just over 12,000 cases. So that is the reality there. We'll keep an eye on other stories as they develop. We're super excited about tomorrow's show. We have not locked down 100% confirmed both guests, but I'm predicting that tomorrow's going to be the most watched program in Real Talk's short history. I'm looking forward to checking in with Kyla Lee right now. As you heard yesterday in our newscast, and as you heard yesterday, I'm sure in conversation people were having, Alberta rolling out stricter impaired driving penalties roadside, coming into effect yesterday, December 1st. The government says it will get impaired drivers off the street immediately. It means that first-time impaired drivers will be handled more quickly outside of court. Impaired drivers could face larger fines and lose their vehicles for up to 30 days. Now, that's if there's not an injury in the accident. That's if there's not kids in the car. There are a lot of ways that you could still find yourself in the criminal justice system, so to speak. Kyla Lee is a decorated Vancouver criminal lawyer with plenty of expertise in DUI. She was, as a matter of fact, named just last year one of the top 25 most influential lawyers in Canada for 2019. Kyla Lee making time for us this morning. Welcome to Real Talk, and good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Kyla, just out of the gates, I've seen some defense lawyers come forward and take issue with Alberta's new impaired driving legislation. What's your initial response to it now that you've had some time to take a look at it, what it actually means for people?
I think it's really problematic. I think it's ultimately going to be found unconstitutional by Alberta's courts. And I think that it erodes people's charter rights and erodes the skills necessary for police to have to conduct proper impaired driving investigations.
Okay, so where does it fall flat? The one thing I'll say that sort of jumps out at me is that a police officer is potentially playing judge and jury on the spot. Is that what you're honing in on?
That is one of the things that's a big concern. And we have a similar program here in British Columbia. To some extent, this was modeled after that. And the reason why it's different and why I'm more concerned about Alberta's law is that in order to request a review of the suspension, you can ask the police officer roadside to give you a second test, but there's no obligation on them to actually follow through with that, which means that the officer basically gets to decide whether you have the right to challenge it in that moment.
Okay, so what's your first of all, can I just let me just say it's oftentimes, and I haven't read the comments yet, and I'm sure that people will have a lot to say, Kyla, about our conversation, but you know, it's kind of tough to have a conversation like this with Sam. Just put it. Yeah, there we go. Kind of difficult to have a conversation like this without coming across like we're condoning impaired driving, right? I'm saying, well, what do people need to keep in mind if they're? That's not the spirit of this conversation. That's not what we're getting at. But we're concerned about people that may be wrongfully convicted, people that may find themselves in a complicating circumstance, and obviously everybody needs to know their rights. So, in the context of this new legislation here, what does the average person, aside from don't drink and drive, what does the average person need to keep in mind? What do they need to know? What do we need to know?
You can lose your license now in Alberta immediately on the spot and have your car impounded immediately on the spot, even for just blowing a fail into a roadside breathalyzer. So it used to be that if you blew a fail, you would be taken back to the police station, you would be subject to further testing, there'd be an investigation, and the results of those evidentiary tests would determine whether you got your license suspended. But now it happens right away on the roadside based on a single test, and the officer doesn't even have to have grounds to ask you to blow into the roadside breathalyzer. They can do that completely arbitrarily.
So this is some are describing it, and I'm curious to get Sheri Arsenault's take. I'll be talking to her with Families for Justice right after I talk to you, Kyla. She's experienced the worst kind of loss. She lost her son in a horrific crash 9 years ago, and she's dedicated her life to ensuring that there's tougher drunk driving penalties in place. This is being described as tougher drunk driving measures, tougher measures against drunk driving while clearing up the courts. Would you agree with that assessment? Are these tougher laws in the sense that you think that they may cut down on drunk driving, or is the incentive not there? I suspect Sheri's going to say to me she doesn't like the fact that people aren't headed to criminal court on a first-time offense.
And I agree with that. I think there's a real deterrent factor about going to court, having to stand in front of a judge, having to hear the story if the officer's testifying and you're having a trial, or having to be held accountable for your conduct if you're pleading guilty and you're being sentenced. And that's being taken out of the process. People are being punished instantaneously. They can apply for a hearing with the Registrar of Motor Vehicles, and maybe they'll win, and maybe they'll get a decision in a month or a year, because they can extend the time. And we see in British Columbia long delays. They're separating ultimately the accountability from the punishment, and those two have to go hand in hand to change people's behavior.
So, Kyla, you say that you're, in your opinion, this is unconstitutional. You think it's going to get struck down in court. That only has to happen once, right? That's there has to be one successful court challenge. Then you've got precedent. Then the whole thing collapses. How do you see this playing out? What's your prediction?
Well, I mean, if I can base it on what happened in British Columbia, we initially did have a successful court challenge all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. The law was found unconstitutional because there wasn't enough of a review process, but the government was able to amend the law, and it's been challenged twice since then, unsuccessfully. So even one successful challenge doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the end of roadside prohibitions in Alberta.
What have you seen, Kyla, in different jurisdictions, and I'm sure that you've studied many of them through the course of your criminal defense career? What would you describe as an effective amendment to impaired driving legislation, or which jurisdiction is doing it right in your assessment, and what are they doing that's different than everywhere else?
I mean, that's really hard to say because the constitutions of different countries are different. But I think the system that we had in place in Canada was being done well when it was being done properly by police. And what I saw as a defense lawyer was a problem with police training and police procedure. Police were not following proper procedures in the investigations. They weren't well trained on how to conduct them. And that's why cases were being lost. Any case that I have where I look at the police followed all the steps properly and did everything correctly, there's not a very good chance that I would succeed. And I think, we rushed to judgment about the strength of the law without considering the strength of the training and the effectiveness in which police are administering the law in their investigations.
Kyla, this is, I know, a conversation that people are going to be having through the holiday break, and this is sort of the type of talk, because typically it's been the season. I hate to put it this way, but let's just speak frankly. It's been the season of impaired driving. Like, it just, every time we get into the holidays, we see the campaigns from MAD and other groups, the holiday campaigns, because typically everybody's been at holiday parties, and that's going to be a little bit different. My only hope is that it means that fewer people will be driving impaired. Another one of the conversations conversations that we've been having nationally for the past couple of years is the impact of new cannabis legislation. In other words, the decriminalization, the legalization of cannabis and people driving. Those that were concerned about the legalization of cannabis, I think were oftentimes referencing what they suspected would be happening on Canadian roadways. What have you seen with regards to trends since the legalization of cannabis? With regards to statistics released by police agencies, including here in Alberta, haven't seen the numbers that some people were concerned about, some people were expecting with cannabis legalization. How about from your perspective as a defense lawyer?
There have been really no significant increases in cannabis impaired driving. I see more cases of people who are driving impaired by drugs like fentanyl and narcotics than cannabis cases, even after legalization. I think that because we had a more relaxed attitude about cannabis use in Canada leading up to legalization, that we never saw that uptick that they had in the US, where even just having a single joint would mean you'd go to jail for quite a long period of time in some instances.
Eileen's listening in. We appreciate her chiming in on the Real Talk RJ hashtag. She's wondering, Kyla, will a first-time DUI offender, in other words, I suppose someone that loses their license on the spot, has their car towed and falls under this new legislation in Alberta, will there be insurance implications under this new law? Do you know yet if there will be?
I don't know the answer to that, and in part because Alberta has a privatized insurance system, so everybody's insurance comes from a different source. The answer isn't clear because it'll depend on your individual insurer.
Okay. Kyla Lee, I think we just accidentally had Kyla bumped out of our... there we are. We got you right back. Kyla, I know that you've got a busy morning in store and you agreed to join us on short notice. We really appreciate it, and thanks for your expertise on this. Congratulations on the trajectory of your career right now.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And congratulations on your show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You can follow Kyla on Twitter at IRP Lawyer. She's doing things differently. I underestimated to a certain degree, didn't I? I undersold her earlier when I said she was named as one of the top 100 influential lawyers in Canada. No, top 25. And she's doing amazing work. You can Google her to learn more about it. And I encourage you, if you follow her on Twitter at IRP Lawyer, to see the videos that she does. Pretty interesting and informative videos. For example, it was out there, ponzu sauce, like the food condiment ponzu sauce. It had been rumored online that you could fail a breathalyzer with ponzu sauce. So it doesn't matter if you're out eating green tea and noodles. In theory, you might fail a breathalyzer. She takes that on in her videos. Really informative stuff, and I encourage you to give her a follow. Let's get another take on this story in just a moment. But first, Sam, I want to recognize one of our sponsors that's making sure that Real Talk is on the air this morning, and we sure appreciate the team at Alta Storage. This may be the time of year where, the snow is starting to fall. It's getting a little bit colder, and you are, you're committed. You're going to force yourself to finally take on that basement project or that third bedroom or the attic or the back garden shed, whatever it is where all that clutter is. You want to move some of it out. You want to get rid of some of it. You want to put some of it maybe in storage. Well, the team at Alta Storage has these frog boxes. They're like the eco-friendly moving boxes. You can pick those up there. They can drop them off, and then they can also set you up with a storage solution. So if you're endeavoring through these winter months to finally put in some time, bring yourself the peace of mind that comes with decluttering, the team at Alta Storage has you covered, and you can check out altastorage.ca or link to them under the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. Our next guest has a very, very special place in my heart. I've spoken to her a number of times. The reason that we speak is tragic. Her voice, though, extremely powerful. Back about 9 years ago, as a matter of fact, just over 9 years ago, on November 26th of 2011, Bradley Arsenault, Cole Novak, and Thaddeus Lake, three best buds, Brad, Cole, and Thad, were on their way home when they were violently struck from behind. Their vehicle struck from behind by a pickup truck traveling at 200 kilometers an hour. These three bright lights were immediately extinguished, altering the lives of thousands of people forever. One of them is Bradley's mom, Sheri Arsenault, who has dedicated her life to fighting for tougher impaired driving legislation, more effective impaired driving legislation in Canada, including her home province of Alberta. By way of her involvement with Families for Justice, it's a real honor to welcome to the program Sheri Arsenault over the phone this morning. Sheri, welcome to Real Talk, and thank you for making time for us.
Well, thank you, Ryan, so much. That's quite an introduction, and geez, you're bringing tears to my eyes.
Well, Sheri, I've got no problem telling you that I've got so much love for you and your family, and I've got so much respect for what you have done over the years, despite the fact that you were placed in such a horrific circumstance. Sheri, what do you make of what you saw from the Alberta government yesterday? Take us into your opinion on Alberta's new impaired driving legislation.
Well, I mean, I discussed it with them last spring because it was leaked out that they were going to do this, and I fought tooth and nail to get a meeting with then the minister at the time, Doug Schweitzer, and the writing was on the wall right there. They were slipping it through under the cover of the pandemic with no debate. And to me, it's disturbing and it's very disheartening. They're misleading Albertans with their stats from out of BC, and they're taking a very, very serious crime. It's in the criminal code for a reason, and reducing it to an administrative fine. And we all know administrative fines are for less serious crimes. And what they're telling Albertans is impaired driving is not serious.
You have liked to see, because I know that, let me not say I know that, I assume that you were not completely content with Alberta's existing impaired driving legislation, or you wouldn't be working so hard to have it changed. What would you have liked to see the government do, Sheri?
Well, I would have liked to have seen them strengthen it for more of a deterrence for individuals that still engage, there's a lot of people that drive impaired simply for the fact that the chances of getting caught are slim to none. And a defense lawyer explained it to me because she reached out and she said, when you get behind the wheel, whether you get home safely and don't hurt yourself or kill someone else, or you do, it's just good luck that you didn't. You're culpable the minute you turn the key in your ignition and drive away. So essentially, our government told me, don't worry, Sheri, if someone is killed, then we'll charge them criminally. And, to me, we don't want it to happen in the first place. So there needs to be a strong enough deterrence in the beginning to change the behavior of people.
Yeah, I've been reading about this, and just on the surface, and Sheri, I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that Kyla Lee was here, the lawyer, to talk to us about this, because we really want to understand it. I recognize, here's where I stand on it with what I understand about the legislation to this point. I understand that our courts are absolutely jammed right now, and in a lot of cases, and I may be using the wrong terminology, but charges are being stayed. Charges are essentially being dismissed against people because the courts cannot hear their trial, or the courts cannot facilitate their prosecution in a reasonable amount of time, and charges are being dropped, which I know is not acceptable to anybody. I know that COVID has made this more of an issue in the courts as they endeavor to catch up, but they were already behind the eight ball, so to speak. So we do need to find a way to cut the caseload, or to find some way, without, I guess, hiring a whole bunch of more Crown prosecutors and building more courtrooms. We need to find a way to address that. At the same time, like you said, Sheri, if somebody drives drunk and they know that so long as they don't hit someone in a crosswalk, right? Or so long as they don't cause a motor vehicle accident, or so long as they don't roll over into the ditch, or so long as they don't have a kid in the car with them, if they get busted, really, a month, you lose your car for a month, you pay $1,000 fine and like whatever else, and it's really no big deal. So the government says, well, yes, but if there's an injury or if there's a fatality, then you'll be criminally charged. I agree with you. It appears to be somewhat of a diluted effect.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, I understand the backlog in the court system. When my son and his two friends were killed, it was darn near 3 painful years before it came to conclusion through the court system. The offenders served less time than we waited for him to be sentenced. So, I understand that, and it is worrisome to all of us. But to take serious crimes and downgrade them, water them down to administrative fines is not the answer. It could be funding. You know how much our cities have grown. We have no problem building new Michaels and Staples and Walmarts, but yet our courtrooms have not changed over decades. We need schools, we need hospitals, and unfortunately, we need more courtrooms. And you cannot water down and downgrade a serious crime. Explain that in one province it's a criminal offense, but in Alberta it's a credit card fine.
Sheri,
it makes no sense to me, and it is the number one crime in Canada.
You mean with regards to frequency?
Well, impaired driving causing death is 3 times more than all other forms of homicide or, criminal deaths. It is the absolute biggest cause of criminal death in Canada by a large amount.
Sheri, you on November 26th of 2011, obviously your life and the lives of so many people dear to you changed forever. And you have dedicated your life now, as I said when I introduced you and I welcomed you to the program, you've dedicated your life to making a real impact and to honoring the legacy of your son. I would imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine that you have learned more about impaired driving statistics and legislation and everything else than you ever would have known before November of 2011. And you've probably gleaned some pretty interesting and informed insight into how the public views or treats or sadly perpetuates impaired driving. What insights have you gleaned over the past 9 years? I mean, we can talk about politicians, we can talk about prosecutors, but what about people?
Well, that's a very good question, Ryan. I've come to learn the tragedy hits a community, it hits a city, maybe a rural town, and everybody's completely devastated, especially, when it's young people. Everybody's devastated, and then they soon forget. There was no outrage in Alberta as the UCP were slipping this bill through. There was not much talk about it. It testified in Ottawa, where our federal government have downgraded this crime twice in the last 8 years, in the last 6 years that they've been in power. And there seems to be no outrage. There's outrage at the time, but it goes away. It's like the public maybe perceives it as, he made a mistake. He made a mistake. She made a mistake. People do make mistakes. I understand that. But, a car is a weapon, and the devastation that it can cause when people are excessive speeds and impaired, or one or the other or both, it's senseless. It's senseless. It doesn't have to be like that.
I don't know if I want to, Sheri, I'm going to ask you this question because I think it's important for people to understand, and I apologize if this question is difficult for you to answer. Jonathan Pratt was convicted of killing your son along with his friends, Cole and Thad. He was sentenced to 8 years and handed a lifetime driving ban. But back in 2018, I know that his parole hearing in Winnipeg granted him 6 months of day parole. That was back in 2018. Where do you stand with regards to forgiveness? Where do you stand with regards to taking a position on whether or not the sentence and the carrying out of that sentence was appropriate. Where are you now, 9 years after the crash?
Well, I can tell you that corrections and the Parole Board of Canada is just another whole form of victimization. The 8-year sentence, it was, concurrent. In essence, after, a third of that, they are on day parole. And so they don't even come really close to serving a sentence. When you ask about forgiveness, that's tough for me because I like to consider myself a forgiving person. I mean, what I wouldn't do to bring my son back and his two friends, but I can't do that. But this Mr. Jonathan Pratt's, it's hard because he never ever showed remorse, not at parole hearings. He essentially couldn't quite understand what the big to-do was about. So it's hard to forgive him because he has yet to apologize to the families, to anybody. He's more of feels sorry for himself that he's in this predicament.
He's never apologized.
So one
to you,
day
Sheri?
maybe I can forgive. I don't know.
I don't know how you forgive some. Well, I mean, I guess people will get all, they'll talk about how you can forgive someone who's never apologized. I don't know how I ever could. Sheri?
Any program that, it's not much programs that they're expected to take, but he didn't really gather any insight that 3 lives were lost because of his actions. And he was a habitual drunk driver. He admitted he drove over 300 times impaired. That was the first time he had never been caught before. So, that's the problem I have with this new law too, is to me, it is just it's essentially giving everybody one freebie.
Yeah.
And I mean, every time they don't get caught, they're getting a freebie, let's face it. So, I just want to see something that deters people. And to me, it's the pocketbook that hurts. Instead of lowering the fine from $1,500 to $1,000, they should have tripled the fine. $3,000. They could have been stronger in so many ways, taking loss of license for a year down to 3 months. And also, it's hard for me to admit, but I have to agree with the defense lawyers on the civil liberties end of it. The police essentially become the judge, jury, and executioner on impaired drivers now. And what if me or you truly weren't impaired? What do we do? So to me, it's an all-around bad law, and they fiddle with the stats out of BC.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Sheri. I mean, I quite frankly, I think that the fine should be $10,000. And I guarantee
I would have said that, but then I'm afraid the public would think, well, that's too much.
Well, it's too much. Well, yeah, but it's going to be, but you know what, Sheri? Like if I think, I'm not saying if me, Ryan Jesperson, but just as a person, if I think that by getting pulled over, I go, well, no, I'm a good drunk driver. I've driven drunk 300 times.
Yeah.
I'm good at it. So I'm not going to crash. And if I get busted, it's $1,000. I mean, I spend $1,000 betting on football on Sunday. I'm not worried about it. If I think it's going to be 10 grand, it's going to be 10 grand and I'm going to lose my license for a year or lose my license permanently, maybe I'll take it a little bit more seriously.
Yeah. Well, and actually, Quebec has done an amazing thing. They have turned it, if you are a second time caught, you lose your license for life.
Good.
And I mean, wouldn't that deter people? I think that's a great law. I actually spoke with many people who drive drunk, and they were honest with me. They said $20,000 and I'd never do it again because, other than that, they just pay it. They don't care.
Sheri, I've got so much love in my heart for you.
Credit card fine.
Yeah, and I want you to know how much support we're seeing for you as well on our text line. Alicia is listening in from Calgary this morning. She says, thank you so much for bringing Sheri on the show. She's bang on the money with the new drunk driving laws. I agree with her that the fine should be sky high. That's Alicia who's listening in from Calgary this morning. Sheri, is there anything...
Sky high. Well, to me, it's a really poor way to handle such a serious crime. And, I hope everybody who gets a chance maybe can speak to their MLAs because, this was the tough on crime party. And to me, they're almost, they were tougher on trespassers a year ago with bigger fines and bigger jail sentences. Trespassing versus impaired driving, I don't understand it.
Yeah, well, I guess the rural base isn't upset about drunk driving as much as it is about trespassers. Follow the money, Sheri. That's what we do here on the show. I'm so proud of you, my friend, and I really appreciate you making time for us this morning, Sheri. Is there anything that you want to leave with our audience to walk with today, to think about today? Well, I just say everybody stay safe, wear a mask, don't drive drunk, and thank you very much, Ryan, for including me in this discussion because it means a lot to me. It really does. Well, Sheri, I'm just have so much respect for you and love to your family this holiday season. That's Sheri Arsenault, who is obviously a remarkable person. Obviously, Sheri also wishes that she would have never met me, right? She wishes she would not be doing these radio interviews. She wishes that none of you knew her name because she's an advocate for tougher penalties for impaired driving. She wishes that on November 26, 2011, a driver at 2.5 to 3 times the legal limit of booze in his blood would not have rear-ended her son at 200 kilometers an hour. The police report showing no signs of swerving, no signs of braking in what was a horrific crash on an Alberta highway. You can check out bradcolethad.com. That's Brad Cole with a K, bradcolethad.com if you want to learn more about what Sheri's doing, and you can connect with her on Twitter. From my Twitter account at Ryan Jesperson, every morning I put out the handles of who's going to be on the show, and that's a great way for you to follow these people. And I know a lot of you started following Adam O'Brien earlier today and started following Kyla Lee out of Vancouver, the lawyer we just spoke with. I encourage you to give Sheri Arsenault a follow as well, a remarkable woman. I've got some thoughts on this, and I'm sure you do too. We're going to get to our hashtag Real Talk RJ in just a moment, but we want to say thank you to the team at Clean Air Club. This is a group that we partnered with right when Sam and I opened up this studio, and we knew that we wanted to make sure that, especially in a pandemic era, that we were doing everything we could to make sure that our air was clean. So they got us this really great air purification unit in here, but their bread and butter is furnace filters. They're a local company. Sam's showing you our awesome air filter. And by the way, it's running right now. You can't even hear it. So that thing is perfect for any space. But what I want you to think about today is if you're watching or listening from home, when's the last time you changed your furnace filter? I mean, do you even know? Do you even remember? I pulled mine out like 2 weeks ago and went, oh, wow. And it's because, not I'm lazy, it's because I have a hard time keeping on track of things, keeping on top of all of my obligations. Like Clean Air Club, they're doing exactly that for you. So you let them know how often you want them changed out. It's a one-time thing at cleanairclub.ca. You tell them the size, frequency. They drop them off for you, they supply them for you, and they give you a little gift to support another local business.
Furnace filters really creep up on you. Like every time I go to change mine, it's caked. And especially since I got a dog, it's just like, oh my God, is it disgusting.
I know, right? It's one of those, and you just, it's not that you're lazy. It's just you kind of go, oh yeah, it's
very, very easy to forget about.
Yeah, no kidding. Like changing your oil, right? Same sort of a thing. Also a shout out to Westworld Computers. For more than 40 years, family owned in Western Canada, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary. Your Mac store, independently owned. There's that big store that has that big Apple logo. You know the one I'm talking about. But they're not locally owned. This family's been in business for 40 years. Daryl and his team, and they want your business. Next time you're in the market, whether it's a phone or a big sort of a creative studio that you're looking to open or somewhere in between, show up at Westworld and let them know that you're a fan of Real Talk and you appreciate their sponsorship. So Sheri Arsenault with a pretty, obviously a firsthand and very moving perspective on drunk driving legislation in Alberta. December 1st, yesterday, changes went into effect. Sam, one of the things I think that, that sort of really jumps out at me is we talk about a first offense in drunk driving and how a first-time offense, people will stay out of the courts and essentially, be dealt with on the spot by a police officer that can issue that $1,000 fine, suspend their, take their car for 30 days. Can we all agree that the first time that somebody's busted for impaired driving is never that person's first time drunk driving? Can we all agree on that? I mean, that.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't have my mic on there. Like the thing is, and I mean, I don't want to single out rural Alberta, but when you talk to people that grow up, out in the country, jumping in the truck after a few beers and barreling down a dirt road, like that is normal. And that's a normal part of kind of that, I don't want to say redneck, but yeah, I'm going to say redneck life that people just sort of ascribe to here. So like, I agree with you. It's a rock and a hard place because as a person who loves people with lives, I want the toughest impaired driving legislation we can possibly have. But at the same time, we cannot be giving law enforcement officers the ability to be, judge and jury on the spot. And
that's one of the things that really concerns me. That's one of the things that really concerns me. And I recognize the importance of, and I tried to really sort of lay it out that there's an awareness here on my part, on this audience's part. People are reflecting that awareness that our courts are backlogged, and it's very problematic because in some cases, violent offenders are having their charges stayed because we can't get them in front of a judge soon enough. So we need to find a way to address that. Part of that is hiring more Crown prosecutors. Part of that is maybe building more courthouses. I don't know with what money.
Well, I mean, that's just it too. Is like our courts are very, it's not something that people think about a lot, but I'm seeing this come up a lot on our YouTube chat today. Is there's a real underfunding of our court system, and the infrastructure is old and is crumbling, and it doesn't serve this province properly anymore.
Yeah. I'm taking a look at the YouTube comments right now. Like Judy says, there's, zero tolerance. You need to have zero tolerance. Mark says Japan has very severe drunk driving laws, very low incidence there of drunk driving. Others are, geez, I mean, and this is not wrong. Judy's not wrong here, who says, a drunk driver, is now the premier of Saskatchewan. I mean, I think back to BC, Gordon Campbell, the premier there, got busted for DUI in Maui, right? In Hawaii, at least. There are, and how do you reconcile this? Like I said, and I just want to, let me just look into the camera and say, I understand that it's when you have a conversation like this and you want to have a nuanced conversation and you want to approach it from different angles and have a meaningful debate on it, it's possible that this comes across that you're condoning drunk driving or you're looking out for the drunk drivers and not the families of the victims. Like, no, that's not the case. But can we also acknowledge that people have, I mean, there are prominent athletes, celebrities, everyday people, friends of mine, quite frankly, have been charged, convicted, pleaded guilty to driving impaired, and have paid their debt to society and have gone on to live productive lives. And boy, how do you find the balance? I mean, I'm not talking about a drunk driver that rear ends 3 young men at 200 kilometers an hour without hitting the brakes and kills them. I'm not talking about that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, life in prison sounds to me to be pretty appropriate in that circumstance. I mean, that's how I feel about that. But somebody that has, makes a mistake, sure, blows over when they didn't expect to. They had a couple of glasses of wine on an empty stomach. They hit a check stop in the holidays, and then all of a sudden, their entire life has collapsed. How do you reconcile that? I mean, I recognize it's not always a popular question to ask, but I think it's an important question to ask. And I'm not sure that everybody would argue or believe that someone that made the selfish and terrible decision to drive impaired should have, in a circumstance where they've not taken a life, in the circumstance where they've not injured someone or endangered the life of a child in the vehicle, for example, that person should have their entire life destroyed. I mean, can we participate in this conversation? I mean, can we have this conversation as a society without coming across as though we're sympathetic to impaired drivers?
I mean, playing the other side of this, if you are caught blowing over the limit and thank God you were caught at a check stop, you didn't kill anybody, getting a stiff fine and having your car impounded and losing your license for a while, you should consider yourself lucky. You know what I mean? Nobody died, and you got off a little bit less financially wealthy, and eventually your life is going to get back together. I think that there's, vehicular homicide where people actually kill people with impaired driving is a very, very serious offense. But like getting behind the wheel, having had any alcohol in the first place it's such a preventable problem. Like, I mean, that, the thing to me is that there is always a choice to do that.
I agree. I want to get to some of these comments. I can't tell you how liberating this is to be able to just go as long as we want, because the conversation is continuing on our live stream on YouTube. It's continuing on Twitter. Donna's watching in, and she says, my heart breaks for Sheri Arsenault. Thank you for sharing her story with us today, especially, says Donna, when we hear that during this pandemic, drinking and drug use is skyrocketing. Donna's absolutely right about that. She says, Sheri, we mourn with you and we thank you for enlightening us on this issue. A really thoughtful comment from Donna there. Crazy James is listening in. You got to follow this guy on Twitter, by the way. Crazy James AB. He's not crazy. He's hilarious. He says, regarding drunk driving, he says, it's funny. Sheri says that, it happens in Quebec. He says, here's my idea. First off, if there are no injuries or damages, you automatically lose your license for a year, no questions asked. Second off, if there is injury or death, you lose your license forever, no questions asked. Says Crazy James, driving is a privilege, not a right. I mean, the whole thing, no questions asked. I don't necessarily support. Again, I'm going to open up a huge can of worms. One of the things I think that the Harper government was criticized for in the whole tough on crime mandate was mandatory minimums. And if you talk to people, with careers in law, with insight in law, they'll say that mandatory minimums aren't necessarily effective. I don't know. I mean, I think that the whole sort of like automatic this is something you'd have to sell to the general population, but also I think you can make a strong argument for it. On the Twitter, the live comment stream, for example, right now, and we're seeing personal stories of loss. Like, I mean, this is what a punch in the gut to hear from Gordon, who's watching today. He says, my sister was killed. How horrible is this? My sister was killed by a drunk driver a day after my other sister's wedding. He was handed a $75 fine for distracted driving. She was 20 years old and engaged. I'm sorry for your loss, Gordon. Blaine says it's a perversion of justice, not just to the victims of a given crime, but to the accused as well, that our fundamental right to a speedy trial is being eroded. Blaine, I agree with you 100% on that. Lauren Corbett, who I know personally, and Lauren, it's great that you're watching. Lauren is a former district chief with Edmonton Fire Rescue. You want some perspective on the impact of drunk driving on a community? Talk to paramedics and firefighters. Talk to police officers that are on scene. Talk to volunteer firefighters. Here's another angle. We'll talk to volunteer firefighters as this show goes on and we're able to log more shows and pursue more story angles. Volunteer firefighters oftentimes see and you don't try to rank them in a ranking of the most horrific crashes, but these are typically volunteer firefighters from rural communities operating with minimal supports and oftentimes seeing the worst highway speed crashes. You talk to them about drunk driving and you'll get a very clear understanding of what it's like. Anyway, back to Lauren, a former retired firefighter, says, keep in mind, fines are punitive only to those that can't afford them, which is huge. I remember hearing about Teemu Selanne. I'm a big Teemu fan. It wasn't drunk driving. It was just driving at excessive speed in his native country of Finland. This was several years ago. Off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me, but Finland ties your your traffic fines to your income or to your net worth. And so Teemu's fine for speeding was something like 80 or 90 grand. I don't mind that idea either. That's an interesting one. You'd have to crunch some numbers, but the big earners, I mean, for a lot of people, I mean, it sounds crazy to us everyday folks, but to a lot of people, even a $10,000 fine is like, that's like a line item but that's like they'll write off 10,000. That's like their spill tab. put it that way, for a lot of people, I think. I mean, that's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah, especially in the case of like speeding with photo radar, is that, because there's no demerits, because there's no consequences. If you're rich and you like to drive fast, it's just another bill you have to pay. You know what I mean? And I love the idea of bracketing to income. And by the way, earlier I was, I don't ever want to move into like a no questions asked scenario. I think you hit it on the head when you read that comment that said, giving everybody a right to a speedy trial is often what solves this problem, because if we can get people expediently in front of a court, there's a very big difference between being caught impaired and being convicted of impaired. And I think that we need more resources to let that court process play out quickly.
Way easier said than done, though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
To say, all we need is expedient court process. I mean, yeah. Katrina making an amazing point on our live chat here on YouTube. Do you want to just sit here all day and facilitate the YouTube chat? Katrina says, this makes me think about the lack of safe and accessible public transport options in Canada. People really rely on cars here compared to places like the UK, she says. That's a fantastic point. I mean, I don't have any... If you want to get blackout wasted, and then you're going to hop on an LRT and not bug anybody and get home safely, that's your call. I mean, that brings into play other issues and other conversations we can have around substance use. But to me, a healthy public transit option, the availability of ride sharing, a walkability of a city, proper, no, I shouldn't say cycling infrastructure, because I think you can actually get a DUI on a bike.
You can, yes.
Yeah, so maybe I won't say proper cycling.
You're technically operating a vehicle on a bicycle.
Blows my mind, by the way, that these the Lime scooters and everything are not like shut down at 3 a.m. I've seen some people going like, whoa, maybe a breathalyzer built into the Lime scooter. I don't know.
Yeah, the funny thing, and having lived in other cities and having traveled to other cities, like when I lived in Toronto and the bars closed at 2 a.m. and I took the bus home, that was, first of all, it was routinely the most hilarious bus ride you'd be on, because you see all sorts of characters on it. But it's a system that worked. Getting people a reliable, I think a very, very, very big part of it, and why this is a conversation that resonates more in Alberta than it does even in other parts of the country, is that we're such a car-centric place. We've tied our cars to our identity here in Edmonton, and we feel the need that we drive everywhere and show off the wheels that we have. And that's great. I like my car. I like driving. I like cycling. I like walking. I take transit often when I go out for an evening, when we can go out for an evening. And it's just, I think that culturally we need to change it so that if you're going to go out for a night where you could be impaired, it should just not even be a question whether you drive or not.
That's Sam Brooks, the intrepid senior producer of this show. Before we go, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Dairy Queen's in Sherwood Park in Northwest Edmonton. The ownership group there, it's two local guys, Michael and Mark, and they own 6 Dairy Queens. Can you imagine owning a Dairy Queen? I'm thinking
that would be dangerous.
It would be, and I know these guys.
I'd weigh 300 pounds, and
minimum.
you'd be finding blizzard toppings falling out of my bag every time I walked home.
My left leg would weigh 300 pounds. I would have a bib. I would have to wear a bib that would just catch my blizzard spill off. If I wanted to just take in something light, I would just have a light lunch of dilly bars if I owned the Dairy Queens, but I don't own them. I just proudly partner with them. These guys are all about a community connection, whether it's obviously investing their money here in these locations, whether it's hiring and employing local people, or whether it's doing an amazing job of supporting local charities. I implore you, if you're going to be hitting a drive-thru today or ordering from your favorite delivery service, to do it, to pick up from Dairy Queens in Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, and we appreciate their partnership. I am so excited for tomorrow's show. I'm going to say right now, the 2 people joining us on tomorrow's show were the 2 highest profile Canadians in the world last week. Both of them. They're both going to be on the show tomorrow, and you're going to see it only on Real Talk. Have an amazing Wednesday, friends. We'll talk to you soon.